Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another episode of Buha's Block. On today's show, I'm thrilled to be joined by friend of the show, I think the guest that we've had on the most frequent guest, Khobi Price of the Southern California News Group, also the Lakers Insider Show on BR. Khobi, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. I think this is if we're including the roundtable we did, which I will definitely include for my statistical purposes. I think this is either 5 or 6.
I need to track the stats and like 10 years from now have the around the horn stats for everyone of the appearances and their performance and all that stuff. But you are leading the way right now. And I can think of no one better to discuss the wild Lakers offseason. To recap, and we are recording this at about 10:30 a.m. Pacific time on Thursday, July 3rd. So by the time this episode is out, something could have happened, or by the time midway through our recording, something could have happened. But as of right now, here is what has happened with the Lakers this offseason. 2025 NBA draft, they trade up from number 55 to number 45, then to number 36. They draft defensive ace Adu Thero. And again, that is the correct way to pronounce the name, as we were told by the Lakers. Then LeBron opts out. LeBron opts in. Did not opt out.
Freudian
slip, but he releases a cryptic, dare I say, passive aggressive statement. Then follows it up by seemingly playing into it with he's golfing and he's wearing this welcome home hat, as people are wondering if he potentially wants to go back to Cleveland. Then you have Dorian Finney-Smith opt out, and he ends up going to Houston. After the negotiations sour, he goes there on a 4-year, $53 million deal. Lakers only wanted to give him a 2-year deal. Lakers sign Jake LaRavia, the number 19 pick in the 2022 draft, to a 2-year, $12 million deal. And I think kind of the DFS replacement to an extent. Then the Lakers finally land a starting caliber center in Deandre Ayton. They win the Deandre Ayton sweepstakes, sign him to a 2-year, $16.6 million deal with a player option on the second year. And at this point, again, where things currently stand, Lakers have 14 players under contract, so one away from the league maximum of 15. You can carry more in the offseason, but you can't have more than 15 on your roster. And they're at about $192.5 million, depending on the second round exception that they use with Thero. If they waive Shake Milton, who has a non-guaranteed contract of $3 million, that gets them down to 13 players and 189.5. It's also worth noting that the Lakers have traditionally liked to enter the season with 14 players on their roster, one spot to kind of play with if there's a buyout guy or maybe there's a trade where they need to take on an extra contract. So they still have their biannual exception remaining, but because of how close they are to the first apron, they could only spend about 3.4 of the 5.1 as things stand. So again, I think if they waive Shake, they can access the full biannual and then still be a little bit under the first apron. They could also just sign someone with a vet minimum contract, and that only counts for about $2.3 million on the cap sheet. So I pose this question to you, Khobi. What do you make of the Lakers offseason so far? I know a lot of fans were crashing out for the first couple days after they lose DFS. They signed Jake LaRavia, who's not a household name. They're in this Deandre Ayton situation, but they finally land Ayton, and it feels like there's some more stability here. They flipped DFS into LaRavia and Ayton. But what do you make of the Lakers offseason and where things are at?
First off, thanks for having me on again. While you were cooking, I was going through your Twitter page to see like how many times you had me on the show. I'm like MJ in '98. It's been 6. This is the 6th time I've been on. MJ 98 style, which is appropriate since I'm wearing my Air Jordan Chicago
guy. Yeah,
exactly. What I make of the offseason so far, I think it's been a good one, to be honest with you. I know obviously you did your film breakdown on Jake LaRavia. I spoke about him, obviously written about him, spoke about him on my show. I gave that signing a B+ on my show. And now that, and I even said it, like the reason I gave it a B+ was because I think and we'll get into him more, I'm sure, throughout the show, but he's a young player, a good player. My only concern was that, they gave him the mid-level or a partial amount of the mid-level. If that prevented them from getting DeAndre Ayton or a starting center who commanded the full mid-level or $10+ million of the mid-level, then I'd be like, as much as I like Jake for LaRavia, I don't know if he would be worth costing your starting center. But now, obviously, DeAndre Ayton's on board. I would give that signing, the LaRavia signing, an A- now, just because now we know for certainty that did not cost you, the most important need you had on the roster, which was a starting center. I like the Adu, moving up to get Adu in the draft. If that's your guy, that's your guy. And the tools are there for a productive NBA player. Is he going to be a rotation player as a rookie year one? It's kind of TBD, especially we found out yesterday about, him missing summer league with the knee issue that he had going back to Arkansas. So he's supposed to be fine by training camp, but we know how these things can go. Will he be, is he going to start off training camp 100%? He's going to have to be eased into it. I mean, that's something we'll see. But overall, and then the Ayton signing is the big one, right? Like that's the big fish that they needed to hit. I think it's been a good offseason. Maybe I'm in the grading mode just because I had to do my own grades on my show. I would probably give it like a B to B plus range. And that's a pending grade just because I do believe there are still moves that they need to make to really fill out the roster in a more productive or in a better way around Luka, LeBron, maybe Austin, but maybe. I think maybe. But so far, I would definitely give it. It's been a good offseason for the Lakers. I think better. Losing DFS hurts, but I think it's been better than going into it. You could have hoped or maybe imagined. Outside of like the dream scenario where they trade for Claxton, they trade for Wiggins, and they switch like all like the jersey. What do you call it? The jersey Photoshop offseason. That's what I call it. It's never realistic. It's hardly realistic. But outside of that, I think it's been a good offseason for the Lakers.
I like the grade you gave. I would probably agree somewhere between a B or B plus. I think it's a fluid grade right now. You can't really judge it until you see the rest of the roster. And that's a funny statement to make when they're at 14 players already. But I would assume that they waive Shake at some point. They have until July 20th to make that decision or include him in a potential trade and then access that biannual exception, which is a real tool for them that could be the difference between a player going somewhere on a minimum versus a player going there for a little bit more. So I think as long as they fill out, like, I will say that still looking at this group, and again, it's like the clay is starting to mold, but it's not fully there yet. I think they clearly need more defense. I would say that I think they need at least 2 more plus defenders in the projected rotation. For as much as I like that starting group of DeAndre Ayton, LeBron James, Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, and Luka Doncic, there's a lot of firepower. Those are 5 guys who could drop 15 plus on any given night, really 20 plus on any given night. And I think that's just going to be an impossible lineup to defend. You have 4 players in that starting group that can punish mismatches and post guys up and take advantage of, if you want to hide a smaller player on Ayton, go to the post or get a deep seal. Same thing with Rui. We've seen him take advantage of when teams will put guards on him. And then you have the pick and roll play with Luka and Austin. Like, I think that starting group can be scary offensively. I just don't think it's good enough defensively. And I think JJ deserves a lot of credit for his defensive schemes in the regular season. We saw some smoke and mirrors stuff that I think helped them be that top defense for about 24 games. But also part of that stretch did include AD, did include the best stretch of basketball we've ever seen from Jackson Hayes, and also included some Max Christie and Dorian Finney-Smith in that. So I think on paper, like, there are a lot of defensive questions with this group. And that, I think is something that they're going to have to figure out with the roster, because I think if it's just like waive Shake and add DeAnthony Melton, I do like DeAnthony Melton off the bench, and I think that would be a shrewd signing. I don't think that's turning this into like a top 10 defense. Like, I think as projected, I would consider them a below league average defense.
I would agree, and it's something I want to get back to this if you don't mind. Something I think that's worth mentioning about the Lakers like financial situation. I didn't know about this until I think his name's Yossi Gazlan.
Yeah.
The salary cap analyst. He runs capsheets.com. He tweeted out, I think it was yesterday, something that I didn't know, but teams can use the biannual exception as a trade exception.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Lakers are able to clear up the entire biannual exception, whether that's, waive, shake, and then, sign a dude to a contract that doesn't cut into the 5.1, then they can use that as a trade exception if they traded for a player, I think it was, who fits into that and has no more than 2 years remaining on their contract. I think that's important to note when we're looking at
Nick Richards, $5 million fits perfectly in.
You took the name out.
Phoenix doesn't need a million centers.
Exactly. So when I read that, I was looking like, all right, what backup centers make $5 million or less and have fewer than 2 years left in their contract? But I think that's important to note when we talk about their financial situation. We talk about backup centers. There's a possibility they trade for one and they could fit into that exception instead of having to sign a minimum contract center. But I'm with you. I mean, when you look at the roster as of how it stands right now, obviously the signings won't be able to be official until Sunday. They still need to sign and do. But in terms of what their, at this moment, projected top 8 or 9 would be, they lack wing. They just lack wing depth and wing defense. And it's funny, like even with the changes they've made, they still have all the guys who are better just defensively at 4. Oh, or 3-4. Like, it's funny, like how that happened. Like, that was the issue with last year's roster. Like, between Dorian, LeBron, Rui, Luka. And some people can throw Vando in there. I mean, Vando's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. He can really defend. And we saw him defend 1 through 5 last season, or 2 through 5, really. But they, even now, I mean, you look at LeBron, Rui, Jake LaRavia, and I'm missing
Luka.
Luka. Missing somebody, right? You're still talking about guys.
Only the best player on the team.
Yeah, only the best guy on the team. August 2nd, can't wait. Yeah, of all those guys, like you don't really have the quote unquote wing stopper. Now, I do think Jake is better equipped to guard maybe like your 3s and maybe some bigger, slower 2s compared to Dorian. Which I listened to your show about Jake. Like, I agree with you. Like, I do think Dorian, like in terms of the interior defender, he's better. He was better, and I think there's certain intangibles that he brings that you can't really quantify in terms of locker room presence, communication, being a guy that JJ can go at, and it's one of those like I can go at him because he's going to take it. Like, there's a certain tone that a guy like Dorian brings that we don't know. Like, I couldn't even expect Jake to bring just because he's a 23-year-old, about to be 24-year-old player. He's this is going to be his 4th season in the league. Like, he hasn't been there, done all that. He hasn't made, he wasn't on that Grizzlies team that made that Western Conference, that run to the second round a couple years ago. He's never had deep playoff runs. Dorian's made, he's had deep playoff runs before. So there are certain intangibles that I think will be lost with Dorian's absence, but I do think Jake can bring a better perimeter defense in addition to other things. But the wing defense is still lacking. I mean, you could argue that your best wing defenders from last year, or your best like guys guarding 1 through 3, are still the same guys from last season. Between Vando, I would throw Gabe in there, and then maybe Jake could be somewhere.
Jordan Goodwin, I think, is
Jordan
in that mix
Goodwin
too.
Yeah, he's in that mix, and then maybe Jake. I think he's maybe better, again, more 3-4s, and maybe really good on 3s, but he could even be your a wing defender. I think he's actually better equipped to do that as opposed to like being a 4 in a lineup, because I think Dorian was, compared to Dorian, he's not as good in terms of helping or being, as a vertical threat protecting the rim. But yeah, wing defense is the thing that I'm just looking at. Just that's the biggest need right now, in addition to another big man.
I would say depth too, and that kind of goes hand in hand with those two needs of just, if you look at, I think the starting lineup on paper is awesome, and that's a really good starting group. But then I think we go to the bench, and it's like your top, guys 6 through 10 are in some order: LaRavia, Vincent, Vando, Goodwin and Dalton. And I just don't. I think if you look at that 6 through 10 versus Houston 6 through 10, or Denver 6 through 10, or OKC 6 through 10, maybe Minnesota. I like their 6 and 7 better than the Lakers 6 and 7, but like now they have some depth concerns after losing Nah. But Golden State, the Clippers, like some of these other teams that the Lakers are going to be jockeying with in the West in the top 6 have just better depth. And I think the Lakers have some guys that are slotted a little bit too high in the rotation that I almost think they need 2 additional players of, maybe a starting wing that slots Rui to the bench and then like another rotation level guy. And that to me would be a more coherent roster. So I think we should talk about Ayton for a second, because that's obviously the headliner of the offseason so far. And I got asked this question on my live, and it really made me think. Is DeAndre Ayton the best center the Lakers have had since Marc Gasol? And that's with, of course, putting AD to the side, depending on how you want to characterize him. Like I consider him a center, but if you want to say AD is a 4, or he's like the obvious guy outside of AD, who's the Lakers' best center since 2021? And I would push it back to just the entire LeBron AD era, starting in 2019. I think DeAndre Ayton is arguably, if not even arguably, like the best center that they've had. I think he's JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, Marc Gasol, Andre Drummond, Thomas Bryant, Damian Jones, DeAndre Jordan, Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood. It's an uninspiring list for the most part. Obviously, JaVale and Dwight were big parts of the 2020 team and winning the title, but I think you could, like, DeAndre Ayton's a 15 and 10, 16 and 10 guy. I think on paper, he's the best center that they've had. And to get him for $8.3 million, I just think that's a big get for the Lakers. And he certainly has some flaws, some limitations, but I think that could be a signing that changes the way that we talk about this team, from not having a center and having to rely on these small ball looks to actually having a legit starting level center.
Yeah, I was looking at it because then you brought up the LeBron era. So I was looking back at every center, like just the depth charts of every center they've had going back to 2018. Back then, I almost forgot about him. Zubac was the one, but obviously Zubac
pre-AD, but yeah.
Pre-AD. But yeah, but even then, like Zubac in 2018-19 isn't the Zubac of now. Like
although he was starting to look pretty good. That was a really bad trade.
Yeah, it was a bad trade. I think it's fair to say that Ayton's without a doubt the most talented center. Not in the
productive. He's the most talented. I would say it's talented, skilled, and productive, but that doesn't mean most impactful. That's the question, I think, here, right?
Yeah. I think that's fair to say. Talented, productivity. Like he, again, non-Anthony Davis for your aggregators out there, because I know this show gets Legion Hoop. Legion Hoops, NBA Central. Y'all love this show, right? I can say it. I'm
going to stay away from that.
Yeah. You're welcome. But yeah, I think definitely the most productive. I mean, pedigree wise, like this is a former number 1 overall pick. Like just the pedigree. I mean, obviously you have the Dwight. Like he was a number 1 overall pick as well. But Dwight in 2019, and then 2021, 2022. Like that wasn't the same Dwight as like prime Dwight, or even like just outside of his prime Dwight. So. I mean, Ayton, I think something that this happens quite a bit when a guy gets traded or he moves on to a situation that may not be the best fit. He's just skill wise, he's pretty complete on both ends of the floor. I know he's not. I mean, we've been talking about defense, or mentioning that that's something that needs to be shored up. But he's a strong rim protector. Now he's not a shot blocker, but at 7 feet. 7 feet, or what is he, 7 feet, 7'1". I think he's like 260, 255. Like he's built, he's strong, he has long arms. I think he has 7'6" wingspan. He knows how to be vertical. He doesn't foul a lot, which I think will be a welcome sight for Lakers fans. Like he's not a big foul guy. Like he knows how to be vertical. He can even step out. I think he's more switchable than he gets credit for in terms of switching onto the perimeter. So that's just defensively, and then offensively. I mean, I know his efficiency has, it dipped, understandably so importantly compared to those last couple of seasons. I think that was his third, fourth, and fifth season, or maybe his fourth and fifth season. Yeah, his third, fourth, and fifth season in Phoenix, which the context was just, let's be honest, worse in Portland than it was in Phoenix. But he has an efficient. He's a good post up guy. He can post up, obviously smalls, but he can post up like-sized players as well, bigger forward centers. Nice touch, nice mid-range touch, which you feel like is reliable, will be reliable, continue to be reliable just because for his career, he's a decent free throw shooter. I know he had a down year this past season, but 76% for his career. Like that shows that the shooting's real. He's done it across multiple seasons. So yeah, I mean, he's pretty complete. He's not a 3-point threat, which is like I know when he entered the league, the thought was he has good touch. Maybe he can extend it out. That hasn't really come to fruition, and it does feel like I don't want to say never, but he's entering year 7, so the odds of that happening now aren't. It feels lower compared to if this were year 3 or year 4, but again, he's pretty complete across the board just in terms of skill wise. Now, obviously, the issue with him isn't so much skill. A lot of it is motor, effort, buy-in, or perceived buy-in, perceived motor, perceived effort. But just from a skill standpoint, a talent standpoint, there aren't many holes in his game on either end of the floor.
I think we're going to see a different level of buy-in and motor and motivation for him, because I think once you get slapped with the buyout label, I think that you're in potentially dangerous territory as an NBA player. Like I've talked about this before, but there's just a reason guys don't want to be bought out or don't want to move to the bench. Like that affects your perception. That affects your bottom line. That affects your next contract. So I think for him now entering the situation where he is playing for his next contract, because he does have that player option for next year. And the Lakers, one thing to note here is that the Lakers are not going to have, I believe, his full bird rights or even early bird rights. I'm not sure exactly on early versus full, but like essentially they could give him the typical raise that you can give a player, which I think is like 120% if he opted out, or they'd have to spend cap space, which they are projected to have about 80 million in cap space next summer with all the expirings that they have, including LeBron James. Go ahead.
They won't have, I just looked it up, they won't have his early bird rights just because they're acquired when a player spends 2 consecutive seasons with the same team without changing via
So it would just be the typical 120% raise, right? I believe.
Yeah.
On the 8.25. So whatever that 20% raise is. I mean, it's probably going to be less than he wants to sign a long-term deal for. Point being, like they probably would have to dip into the cap space to retain him if he's opting out. And I assume this is more of a 1-year situation in terms of him being on this contract, and then the next contract will be signed next summer, whether that's with the Lakers or someone else. But I think he's in a point where like there is an element of this is he needs to prove himself for his next contract, but I also think this is a golden opportunity for him of being the starting center on the Los Angeles Lakers and playing with Luka Doncic. I think he will be playing with LeBron James, Austin Reeves. Like this is a team that should win 50 plus games next season, should be contending for a home court spot in the West, and potentially go on a deep playoff run. So I think if he can be a part of that, like he hasn't, I would say this is the best situation he's been in probably since 2022, which was that 2021-22 Suns team. They won, I believe, 64 games and lost in the second round to Luka, of all people, in 7 games. And then, the year before they made the finals and they lost in the finals to the Bucks. But I think Ayton, like that stretch, like we saw in 2021 and 2022, how good he was, how important he was for that Phoenix run. I thought, especially in 2021, he was really good against the Lakers. I thought he held up fairly well against AD. And then I think, as someone who's closely monitored Jokic's career, he's played some of the best defense I've ever seen against Jokic, especially in that 2021 series. So like, I know it's been a few years. We're referencing 3 to 4 years ago, but after the Phoenix situation kind of went off the rails, then he gets traded to Portland, and Portland has been one of the worst teams in the league over the last couple of years. Like we haven't really seen him in a competitive environment with expectations in a minute. So I think just to see what that looks like will be interesting. But let's also talk about Jake LaRavia here, because I think he's the guy that. Go ahead.
Can I add one more thing, just quick? This actually ties into a former Lakers center, oddly enough. When I was thinking about like the spot Deandre Ayton's in and why he should be more motivated at this point in like making this work the best it can, I thought about former Lakers center Andre Drummond. And I thought about him because he has that clip that's gone viral several times about like I used to be $100 million player contract, and now I'm on a bleeping league minimum. And I think it's important to note, like Andre, I think he was a little older, deeper into his career when he took that buyout with the Cavs and then joined the Lakers, I want to say.
Yeah,
that 2021 season. But since then, I mean, I've looked it up. Since then, like he's been a player who's been on every single season since then. He's been on a salary of $5 million or less. Like this is a guy that was making.
He was 27 at that time, so actually the same. But that was his age 27 season, which this is about to be Ayton's age 27 season. So similar points of their career.
So yeah, similar points of their career. I mean, Andre Drummond at one point was, I think he was an all-star a couple times, very productive. I mean, big rebounder. He started to develop some playmaking chops in terms of, being able to operate as a hub. You take that buyout, and then again, since then, he hasn't had a double-digit salary. I mean, it's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, basically 4 or 5 seasons. And that's not an indictment in terms of like, he's still obviously in the league. He's still a productive player. He's still obviously teams value him. Good backup center. However, when you take that buyout and you reduce when you make that step, you do run the risk of changing just how your market looks for the rest of your career. So that's why and obviously again, they're not comparable players. And so I think, Ayton's more skilled. He can offer in this also a different period in the league. But that's someone who came to mind just in terms of, you take that buyout, you think, you hope that, I'm going to be productive. I'll be able to show out. You can still play well. And then just depending on, circumstances go, you may not be able to get back to being Ayton's point, a $35 million player or a $30 million player, 25. Like this is why this upcoming season and maybe even this next season is going to be so critical for DeAndre Ayton. But yeah, let's go to Jake. I just want to say that.
No, I agree. I think I'll add something as well. I think like the two areas he's really going to improve the Lakers are defensively. I think offensively, his skill speaks for itself. As you mentioned, he can post up, he can pick and pop, pick and roll, shot 80% on at the rim last season, one of the best layup finishers in the league, a legit lob threat. He's not like that explosive pogo stick athlete like Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford or someone like that, but he is because of the size, the wingspan, I think just the skill and the talent around the rim. He's got a soft touch. Like he can finish lobs, and I think he's someone that offensively I have very few questions with him. It's really the only question for me offensively is like he averaged more turnovers than assists last year. I think sometimes the processing, decision-making can be better. But defensively, I think defensive rebounding and the rim protection. Like I just think he's an upgrade on Jackson in both regards. And to go from Jackson, who did show a lot of growth last year, but to me is more of a middling to good backup center, depending on how he's performing. Like he's much better rebounder than Jackson, and I think a more stable rim protector than Jackson. Even if Jackson will get the block into the fourth row, and I do think he's improved with not fouling and his rim protection, but like just DeAndre's in I think a different stratosphere. Also as a guy who just plays a lot of minutes, like 30 plus minutes basically his entire career, walking double his entire career, and that does like the production isn't everything, but I do think there's something to he's a 7'1" really good defensive rebounder that's going to help the Lakers protect the glass, which has been an issue for them for years now. So let's get into Jake LaRavia, though. As you said, I liked the move at first, and it actually happened while I was live. I went live at the deadline, or going into free agency. So I was kind of collecting my thoughts on the fly. But since talking to some people, looking at the film, like I think this dude is a hidden gem. And I think because of playing in small markets, Memphis, Sacramento, playing on teams that kind of underachieved or banged up or whatever, like he hasn't really gotten a lot of attention. But if you look at his game, and his stats don't jump out, and some of the advanced stuff doesn't jump out either. But actually, just watching the film on him, I'm like, this guy is his own Swiss Army knife to some extent, where he can dribble, pass, shoot, attack closeouts. Awesome offensive rebounder, like an incredible offensive rebounder for his size. You look at his cleaning the glass offensive rebounding impact, and his teams are dominant on the offensive glass when he's on the floor. And then defensively, he can switch across multiple positions. I had several clips in my breakdown about him guarding Tatum and Kawhi and Jokic and Triple J, and like he's holding his own. He's deflecting entry passes. He's doing the Alex Caruso, and he's a pest. He's getting under people's skin, and then he's also tracking the bigger, like not crazy athletes well off the dribble. I think Kyrie, Anthony Edwards, Shea, those guys, he should not be guarding them, similar to DFS. But I think he's actually a better perimeter defender than DFS. It's the interior where DFS is a better rim protector, help side guy, rotator, decision make. Like, DFS is special within his own right with what he could do defensively. But I say all this to say, like, I think there's a legitimate chance that next year he's as good, if not potentially better than DFS. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, and DFS got the contract he got for a reason, and I think he deserves it. But I think LaRavia at $6 million is a remarkable value. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by how good this guy is.
Yeah, it's something that I remember speaking on one of my shows about like maybe a month or so ago, the importance of finding those hidden gems. I think someone asked me, or someone mentioned in a comment, like the Lakers shouldn't be focusing on developing players. And I countered, like, no, like they need to develop players, like especially in this modern NBA. Like, and I think they were saying like, the young players, unproven players, but you need like I countered like, well, Maxwell Lewis, geez, Max Christie was a developing player. Like they've developed Austin Reeves. They've like Rui, when they traded for Rui, he was a few years into his career, like Jake LaRavia is, but they've developed Rui Hachimura into from a player who you're kind of like, what kind of is he, to a reliable rotation player who can start or can be like a high end bench player in Rui Hachimura. So like you can't have, like when you're trying to build out a championship roster, especially in the modern NBA, it can't always be 28, 29, 30 plus year old guys. Like you do need to develop guys or find these hidden gems who you can sign to contracts that they're simply going to outperform. I mean, look at the two teams that were in the NBA Finals. I mean, both rosters are filled with players who are outperforming their contracts, developing. Like this is the modern NBA. You can have your veteran players. You can have guys. You need a mixture, right? You need guys who are in their primes. You probably need some veterans who have been there, done that. But you also need developing players who either have skill sets or developing skill sets that can kind of fit around or with your star players or with the rest of the roster, and who are going to get better, the year you have them, the following year, and so on and so forth. Guys who you can count on, who develop over a 3-4 year period, and then, you depend less on those older players. So I from a value standpoint, from a skill set, I mean, you spoke about the skill sets. I'm just going to basically repeat everything you said about him. The one thing that stood out to me, I will say, the catch and shoot numbers were very impressive, at least for this past season. I think I wrote it. I think his catch and shoot 3-point percentage was like 19th out of 249 players who took at least 100 catch and shoot threes. Good relocation shooter. I know it's something you spoke about. Like a lot of people say, like some people have said movement. I don't know if he's so much a movement shooter, but he's a good relocation guy.
Which is like there's a nuance in there. There's some subtlety with it.
Yeah, he's not coming off, like he's not running off pin downs, running off screens, but he knows like if LeBron, Luka, Austin, if they drive, he knows how to get from that, get from the slot and move to the corner to create that little bit of space for the driver, but also for himself. Get that defender. I think it's still a phrase that JJ used: create that indecision. Mm-hmm. He knows how to create indecision for defenders, and defensively just disruptive. Solid on ball, solid perimeter on ball, but he's disruptive in terms of his hands, passing lanes, front. Like he's a disruptive. He hustles, and you need, again, for a team we talk about, LeBron being whatever 40, Luka, he's in the prime, but he's a slower footed player, not the most athletic, more methodical. Like this team isn't the most athletic. Like Adu should help. Maybe a healthier Vanda would help. Ayton should help. But getting a guy like Dick LaRavia, who may not be the most like NBA combine pop out in terms of athlete, but just hustles, that's going to be something that they benefit from on both ends of the floor.
You can just say he's white. I mean, And apparently, according to X, looks like me.
Oh yeah, congratulations on knowing the Lakers.
I think I've been compared any white NBA player who has like somewhat styled or tousled brown hair over the past like decade and a half. I've been compared to Austin,
Hilarious.
Jake LaRavia, Dalton, Tyler Hero, Zach Collins, Myers Leonard. Just go down the list. But yeah, he's white, so he's more athletic than he looks, and I think he like.
Are you saying he's sneaky athletic?
He's sneaky athletic, you know, high IQ, hustle guy. But seriously, like I was impressed with his ability to mirror on the ball, and I think similar to DFS, and this is where to bring it to the beginning of our conversation, talking about the offseason and what they still need. I think the Lakers primarily are lacking defenders who can defend 1 through 3. As we've discussed, They have multiple guys. Like now they have their starting center. They have some guys in LeBron and Rui who could be part of centerless groups. And I assume we'll see some centerless groups with LeBron, Rui, and Jake, or LeBron, Rui, and Vando, or just some combination of those 4 guys. You got Luka, who could also defend either front court spot. But you need backcourt defenders, and I think with Gabe potentially being a trade piece, and also with just some of the, say, inconsistency with his shot and just his offensive production, I think you need an upgrade there probably, or at least another player at a similar level that you could have some flexibility. So again, if they added De'Anthony Melton, who's been the hot name out there for them with either the biannual or the vet minimum, he's someone I really like. I think that's like an upside swing for a low cost, but I still think they need to make some sort of trade for a guy who could defend like the best backcourt guy and the best perimeter front court guy as a starter. And I don't think that's Rui. I don't think that's Austin. And I think if you're going with Ayton, LeBron, Austin, Luka are the 4 locks in the starting group, that 5th guy I think needs to be able to defend 1 through 3. So as we pivot to the rest of the offseason here, do you agree that is the primary need? And when looking at that player, what are some of the skills or traits you'd like to see? And then is it backup center and just like another point of attack backup guard, or like how do you see the final like 2 to 3 spots on this roster?
Max Christie.
Well, yeah, would have been great to have kept him.
Yeah, I said that more so for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, seriously. Yeah, no, I agree. Like to me, that's the biggest hole. They are missing that. I'm saying Max Christie, but like a guy who kind of played that role, who can knock down a shot, catch and shoot, attack a closeout, but defend really like 1, 2, 3, but really like 1 and 2, because that's really what Max was doing. I mean, he defended some threes, but he was really your primary ball handler defender, right? That's the guy who the Lakers are missing. The guy who you can say, night in and night out, regardless of the matchup, you say, all right, you're going to guard him, and then we can figure out our defensive matchups from behind that. But we know that's something that's night in and night out. So that's the player, and those players are just hard to find, to be quite honest. But to me, that's the biggest hole. And I think it would be exploring whether, obviously I know the Lakers are exploring trades, but whether it's involving moving Rui to the bench or, involving Rui in a trade for that kind of player, I don't think you're going to get that kind of player with a biannual exception. Like that player is too valuable. I've looked through the available free agents. Honestly now, like since the Ayton signing has been kind of quiet, that was like the last domino. Like there aren't really, to me, players who fit that on a starting caliber level. And then you need another backup center. And then, like, depending on if you do make that trade, that's going to open up another hole more than likely, or another need rather. But to me, like, the biggest one right now is, can you find, whether it's a big guard or a wing who can be more defensive oriented and reliably take on those primary ball handling assignments, when it comes to guarding 1, 2, 3s. 1, 2, and 3s. I'm not even as concerned. I actually prioritize that more than the shooting itself. I would prioritize the defensive part of it, then if they're a 34, 35, or even 33% 3-point shooter, I'd be like, that's fine. You got Luka, you got Austin. Like your starting lineup's going to have guys like you don't need them to be able to do all that. You're going to have 4 almost like offensive hubs.
Yeah, you could run DHO and elbow actions with Ayton. I think there's a lot of different things you could do with Ayton offensively. I was just looking up the remaining forward free agents in order of previous average annual value: Marvin Bagley, Chris Boucher, Trey Lyles, Jonathan Kuminga, who's going to get a bag from someone and probably get traded somewhere. If not now, then at some point next season. Precious Achua, James Johnson, Doug McDermott, Markieff Morris, Isaiah Jackson. Well, they extended the qualifying offer. I guess they haven't re-signed him yet. Jay Crowder, Bull. Like it just gets. These are all. I mean, Kuminga, Achua, Boucher, I like them, but those aren't like wing stoppers.
You said Brogdon, right?
So I was looking at forwards. Now,
you're looking at forwards.
I will look at. So there's Malik Beasley. Amir Coffey is the one for me that I really like, and I think if there's a way to get him for the biannual, that would be someone that I would. You could get Amir Coffey for the biannual, and I guess DeAnthony Melton for the minimum, and then also trade for a starting level defensive wing, and then I don't know, maybe a minimum backup 5 like that. Maybe like, you know, there's been some buzz about a potential Jackson reunion, which I didn't anticipate, but that has been out there. So maybe Jackson is your backup placeholder 5, and then you have the option of Ayton, Jackson, or centerless small ball looks, and then on the wing it's a new starting wing, and then you add Coffey and Melton into the mix off the bench. But yeah, I mean it's not great in free agency, so it almost has to come through a trade.
Yeah, and Amir Coffey, I think I mentioned him on my show as like a free agent wing. I really would like him for the Lakers. I just don't know. Like my focus is more so on like a starting caliber. Like
there's none in free agency right now.
Yeah, none in free agency. No, I will say Amir Coffey. Like he is he was playing 20 like in the 20 minutes per game, like 24 minutes per game for the Clippers last year. Like he's had back-to-back seasons of being like really in the rotation, playing 70 games both seasons, 20 minutes. So he's a rotation level wing. But I do want to. It would benefit the Lakers to find a wing you can rely on for 28, 29, 30, 31 plus minutes per night and take on those primary assignments. But the other reality is that it may have to be a by committee thing where, you know, it's a mixture of, if they sign Coffey, maybe you have to be like Coffey, LaRavia, Melton, if you get him.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's just not, it's just when you look at the, you know, what Minnesota's trotting out Jaden McDaniels, and OKC's got Caruso and Wallace and Dort and J-Dub, and to say nothing of their rim protection. And Denver, I guess, but I mean, they got Aaron Gordon, but they don't have the best defensive group. I do like Christian Brown. I think he's really solid as a 3-and-D wing, but yeah, it's just when you compare their two-way wing options and their perimeter defenders against the top teams in the West, it's just, I don't think it's really close.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be. And that's also, I think you've spoke about this on your show or a few shows, and I know I have, or expressed a sentiment. It was going to be challenging with the resources they had available. It was going to be challenging for them to fill all their needs this offseason between starting wing, starting center, backup center, potentially, backup guard, depending on what happens with Gabe, what happens with Jordan Goodwin, or just like what you do with the rest of your. It was going to be difficult to it's like whack-a-mole, where it's just like, all right, we got that one. Oh, snap, another hole opened up. All right, we got that. Oh no, we just opened up another issue. So if there was a need that we're going to leave open, this is better than if they filled the starting wing and then they had like a Jackson or a Jackson level player starting at center again for an entire season, just because that was just not a situation they could run back. Especially having Luka on the team. Like Luka almost requires a higher caliber center compared to maybe if you were, I guess, a non-Luka team.
Which at this point, it's like it's almost like I think you can overcome a gap in like talent or skill versus fit sometimes, right? With maybe you move the better player to the bench and you start the player who's a little bit of a better fit, and you just reshape your rotation and your lineups and whatnot. But I think at this point, it's like you probably got to roll with your 5 best players. And I don't know if I think maybe LaRavia, because I do see some overlap with him and Rui in terms of really good catch and shoot player. I think he's a better rebounder than Rui. I think he's a better perimeter defender than Rui, and I think he could do more on the ball, but you don't necessarily need that with the starting group. But if it just comes down to we need someone on this roster to guard wings, I think LaRavia is arguably better equipped to do that than Rui. I don't know how Rui would feel about that. He's in a contract year. He's eligible for an extension, so you would have to navigate that situation. But I think the Lakers are probably just rolling as things are constructed with that starting group. And again, I think maybe the offense, they could be a top 5 offense and actually actualize their potential on that end now that they got DeAndre Ayton. And this is such a juggernaut of an offensive team that they could be 3rd in offense and 17th in defense. And that makes you a top 4 seed in the West and a legit threat to at least make the conference finals. But I think they're in this spot where I think, again, we said B plus with the offseason, but it could be an A- offseason if they nail a trade or they get a couple of value signings with the biannual and a vet min.
I started smiling because while I was listening to you, I was wondering if you were going to bring up a scenario that I think one of your listeners or viewers brought up. Previous show. I was wondering if you were going to go the route of start Jared Vanderbilt in place of Rui. I was hoping that.
I know you're a start Vando guy. I just think the offense needs to get, like, he needs to improve 20 to 30% offensively in multiple ways. But like, I think there's, the Andre Robertson archetype doesn't really exist anymore, and I think you need to be like somewhat of a threat offensively, and I think he's wherever's like the bare minimum. I think he's still below that to a point that is ultimately detrimental.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially I was on start Vando just because I think he could fill that defensive need for this team.
You're just sacrificing, I think, a lot offense. Like I'm just clogging the paint for the entire time he's out there.
Yeah, and then I mean, because even I said, like, when I was like describing like the perfect starting level wing for this team, like defensively Vando fits. I even said offensively, I don't need you to be a high level like if you can do 33, 34, 35, that's fine. Problem is Vando he's not a 3-point threat. And the finishing like is even more concerning. So it's like you're not a threat inside the arc, outside we're hugging you up in the paint. Or we're going to play off, or we're maybe switch matchups where we put a center on you, and then we can send extra help to Ayton or LeBron or whatever. And that's when it gets problematic. So I hope you would go there. Especially after this season, I don't even know if I can go there just because the offensive concerns, even like, I'm being serious, like they were still present. And defensively, I know he had been out for such a significant amount of time. But it did seem like there's a little bit of slippage defensively, athletically, where, again, giving him the grace of you missed so much time.
Double foot surgery,
double foot surgery,
maybe right.
And that was coming off of missing. Yeah, and that was missing so much time the previous year. Like, let's see what it looks like. You get a healthy offseason in front of you. His first healthy offseason in a while. Like, let's see what it looks like, come fall, like athletically, defensively, and maybe offensively, being able to round out his game. But yeah, I look up and down this roster. I'm just thinking they need help. They need significant help to like be a true contender in the West, just defensively. Because I think we've learned
you need
that,
Ayton locked in. You need to nail the next couple signings. You need Ayton locked in. You need LeBron locked in. I think you need LaRavia to be able to kind of scale up, because I think really the biggest question mark with LaRavia is he's never been a full-time rotation player on a good team. Like, Memphis was so banged. It was funny. I was going through his, just like, I want to see where he's at in the pecking order each of his seasons in the NBA. And like Memphis had like the 2 seasons, the 2 full seasons he was in Memphis, it was like they had like double digit guys playing 20 plus minutes because they've had so many injuries that they've had to cycle guys in. So this is going to be his first time as like a 7th man, 8th man on a team that is expected to win 50 plus games. He's going to be playing 20 plus minutes a night. So just he's unproven in that regard. Like I think he'll be fine. I think he's shown enough in the flashes of especially in Sacramento. I thought he closed out the season really strong in Sacramento, but like there are some questions there of just how he can scale up, but you're going to need a lot from him defensively. Again, maybe Melton or whoever off the bench. And then I think Vando, if he can get back to both, being better offensively to where he was a couple years ago, but then also athletically, as you said, like I thought he lost some of that agility and foot speed, which is understandable. He's coming off double foot surgery, coming off basically 2 lost seasons back to back. If he can get back to being who he was when the Lakers first got him, or who he was earlier in his career in Utah and Minnesota, like that player can change how I view the defense. It's just right now it feels a little bit like wish casting versus what the reality is currently.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say the if you're the Lakers or if you're a Laker fan, for Jake, you're hoping that, yeah, you're right. He didn't, like, I was looking through the game log and it's like he really first started to get his shine. It was that season that Memphis was just like ravaged with injuries, and they basically like tanked the end of that season, more or less. And that's when he first got his like first real. I forget which season that was. I think that may have been his second season. Maybe that was his first. But the hope if you're the Lakers is that Jake he can resemble the player he was with Memphis to start this season. Really productive, reliable. That's when he was shooting his best, playing alongside Triple J and Desmond Bain and John Murray. Like that's who you're hoping he can be, that player, and develop off of that. Sacramento, he was still solid. He finished the season strong. But obviously that context wasn't the best context. And sometimes it can be hard to get a feel for a player when they're playing in those March games. I know he got hurt or he stopped playing. I think it was late March. But you're hoping that that Jake LaRavia we saw, October, November, before getting traded, that resembles the player he can be for the Lakers. But, I mean, their offseason, again, has been productive. I've liked they haven't – and the other thing that I think we mentioned maybe at the top, but the other great thing about the greatest thing, or one of the greatest things about the Ayton signing is that you've got a starting center without having to trade for him. So you don't have to give anything. So you still have the optionality of trade, like having basically every trade asset we talked about that we're talking about, maybe having to acquire Claxton or Gafford or, name a starting level or all these other centers. You still have all of that to acquire the starting level wing, or, potentially trade for your backup big, or, potentially put them in or slot them in with the biannual exception. Like you still have all those, all those assets and options available to continue to upgrade your roster. To me, that to me is not obviously the best. Like the best part is hopefully the player Deandre Ayton, but one of the best parts is that you still have the options to go out, to be creative going outside to improve your roster with everything we talked about, potentially trading for Claxton or Gafford or whoever else.
It's just a great value. It's DeAndre Ayton making $8.25 million versus DeAndre Ayton making $35.6. It's just total, like the contract changes how you view a player in their production. And I would be surprised if he does not outperform that contract. I think at a minimum, he's a non-taxpayer mid-level-esque player, if not, a bit higher, although the middle class is getting squeezed in the new CBA. Final one here before we wrap, and we're gonna set the disclaimer that the Lakers are not a fully formed team yet. They're not a fully formed roster. They still, I think, are going to make at least one free agency signing, if not a couple. And then there's still the possibility that they make a trade for a wing, backup center, whatever. But as currently constructed and looking at the rest of the West, you have the juggernaut season. OKC just had 68 wins, win the title. You have Houston traded for KD, extended Adams and Smith, renegotiated with Fred VanVleet, signed DFS. Then you have Denver. They just traded MPJ for Cam Johnson. They added Jonas Valanciunas, Tim Hardaway, Bruce Brown. Minnesota lost Nah. Clippers added Brook Lopez, and looks like they're keeping most of their guys other than maybe Amir Coffey shakes loose and goes to the Lakers or someone else. I think Golden State's the wild card here, where there's been a lot of Horford buzz. It looks like they're the favorites to get him, but it's also like, why is that being held up right now? I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Then you got the Kuminga situation with them, and then I think that's it. I don't have Dallas in the same class until they get Kyrie back. I think I like the depth, the size, the athleticism, the two-way play, but like I still think the offense is not going to be as good as maybe some people are talking about it being. So we could throw Dallas in there, whatever. No one else.
Did you mention Minnesota?
I did. I said that they lost Nah.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, okay. No.
But they have Dillingham and like Terrence Shannon, and they got some guys in the back end of the rotation that I think aren't going to replace Nah's exact skill set, but could. Dillingham was a lottery pick. He's someone that could be a pretty good player. So pose it to you. Where do you currently have the Lakers in the West? And you don't have to give me a ranking per se. If you want to give me a ranking, that's fine. But maybe if you want to tier it or rank it, however you want to, assess the Western Conference, where do you have LA with this current roster?
Yeah, right now I'm looking at the standing. That's why I was about Minnesota. I thought you said that. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, right now OKC's in the tier of their own. Like, if I'm a tier, they would be tier 1. I really like what Houston did. I like what Denver did. I think I made it like Denver's done an awesome job. I just don't know how, getting Bruce Brown for a minimum, like, that's ridiculous. That was like, the trade for Cam Johnson was like, oh my goodness. And then because I forget which one happened first. I think the trade happened first, and then afterward it came through that they signed Bruce Brown for a minute. I was like, wait, what?
Well, and at first, because what I've noticed too is like the new way to unveil the minimum contracts is you just say they signed a 1-year deal, and then you don't give the terms. It's cryptic and it's mysterious, and it's like, okay, so what? Because I thought for me the actual revelation was I thought Tim Hardaway signed for their non-taxpayer MLE, which I didn't love, but I was like, sure, he's a fine bench player. Like, I have some questions about him in the playoffs defensively, but whatever. Then I found out it was a minimum, and I was like, THJ on a minimum is like, I would take that if I'm the Lakers as well. So Denver has crushed this offseason.
Right.
Like, it's close between them and Houston. I give Houston the edge because of KD, but Denver's done an awesome job.
Yeah, I was gonna say, getting Tim Hardaway Jr. I like him. I don't know if that's getting him on a minimum is great value. I don't know if I wonder just what he'll be able to contribute for this specific Denver team. But even with that, I acknowledge they upgraded their roster in a real way. So I would put them below Houston in tier 2. Obviously OKC tier 1, and then from there I kind of I see tier 3, Minnesota, Minnesota, Golden State, the Lakers. The Clippers I would probably include them. That would probably round out tier 3. I would maybe have the Lakers, maybe 5, 6 in that tier with the Clippers. Maybe have Minnesota and Golden State above them, or maybe you can swap out Golden State and Lakers. But I think they're right there in tier 3 for me right now. And then you have Memphis, Dallas. I mean, then you have the rest of the West after that. And something that this exercise and just looking at it, I think the middle of the West, kind of like last season, is going to be crazy. But I think we're going to see that play-in part of the West, maybe 7 and 8 look strong. But similar to last year, that 9 through 10, and honestly, maybe even the 8 through 10, 8 through 11 is going to be a little bit weaker compared to what we think of the West typically. That's something that stood out to me.
I agree. I think it's much more loaded with the playoff level teams.
Yeah,
I'm just
1 through 7's these are real teams, and specifically maybe even OKC should run away with the West again, but really 2 through 7 is stacked. So maybe if you're a 2 through 7 team, you may load up on more wins because last year 8 was a 48 win Memphis team. I think 8 this year may be a 41, 42 win team, which is still a solid team, but not a potentially a close to 50 win team like Memphis was, or even Golden State was at 7.
We're pretty closely aligned here. I think I I always like having contingencies within these things, so I'm going to give my contingencies.
Yeah.
I have tier 1 OKC by themselves. Tier 2 for me right now is Houston and Denver. I am struggling with which team I prefer or believe in. I think that I think I trust Houston more in the regular season and Denver more in the playoffs. I think that Denver has the infrastructure of being a 2023 title team. You still have Jokic, Gordon, MPJ, Christian Brown. I think has really proved himself last season and was a big part of that 7-game series versus OKC and guarding Shea. I think Cam Johnson is better than MPJ just straight up and is a little bit of a quicker processor and decision maker and will fit in nicely offensively and is a better defender. And then you got the added depth. So I kind of lean like, I guess if we're doing standings, I would put Houston ahead of Denver. If we're doing who would win in a 7-game series, I would lean Denver, but they're close right there, neck and neck, 2 and 3. Then I think there's a tier 3 of Minnesota, the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Warriors. For the Clippers and the Warriors, my 2 big things are just Jimmy is about to be 36, Steph's 37, Draymond's going to be turning 36 next season. Like those guys are hitting the point that with LeBron, it's a little different. He just doesn't age. And KD, like we have seen some of these older stars still produce at all-star, all-NBA levels deep into their 30s. And I think Steph will be fine, to be clear. But like Jimmy and Draymond, if those guys slip even 5%, 10%, like that affects, like Golden State needs them to be like top 50 players. And if they're not both that, then I think they're in a tough spot, especially with losing Kuminga. Clippers, it's Kawhi's 34, James Harden's 35. There's always questions with them with health and just availability and whatnot. So I would have the Lakers at worst at 5th. And I think as constructed, I have them 5th and Minnesota 4th. If they nail the bench signings and they get a Melton, a Coffee, a good, decent backup center, I probably put them 4th, and I like their depth a little bit more than Minnesota's because I do think Minnesota gets shaky once you get to spot 8, unless Dillingham takes a big jump. Now, if they do a trade for a wing, but I think the best player they could probably get, or I'll be careful with how I frame this, that's maybe available is let's say a Herb Jones, and if they get a Herb Jones next to Austin and Luka, all of a sudden we're vaulting them into that Denver-Houston tier and maybe even the top of that tier, depending on how the rest of the roster looks. But if they don't trade for that player, I have a hard time seeing them going from tier 3 to tier 2. I could see them at the top of tier 3, but I think they have to make a trade to get to the Denver-Houston level.
I agree. I'm probably a little bit higher on Houston compared to Denver right now. If you ask me about playoff situation, I really like Houston's defense. I'm a defense guy. Yeah, I think I realized it. I just like their defensive infrastructure. Yeah, I like Houston's defensive infrastructure. I like their identity from us. Like they're going to be a tough, big, physical team. Like they already were that, and then they added KD and Dorian to that group. And obviously keeping Fred, extending Adams, extending Jabari. I think he's a polarizing player, so he doesn't always get the shine or love he deserves. I do think from an identity standpoint and that toughness standpoint,
Brooks.
I think losing him is going to actually, we're going to see, it's going to be some maybe in those smaller moments. I think it's going to be noticeable because he was, to me, like, he's the guy kind of like one of the guys setting that tone along like Fred. Because even though Fred's 6 feet, maybe 5'11", he sets a certain tone defensively in terms of toughness. He's a culture setter. That's why they brought Fred and Dylan Brooks in a couple of years ago. They were tone setters. So losing one of those tone setters, you don't always see the intangibles they bring. Even if Dylan Brooks can be a frustrating player, again, a polarizing player, there are intangibles that he brings to your group that Houston just may miss out on. But all that being said, I still think they still have the identity that I personally believe will benefit them. But when it comes to the Lakers, I see them just a couple of maybe signings or a couple moves away from maybe even vaulting into that, second tier with OKC being in a tier of their own. But right now, it's only July 3rd. free agency actually moved very quickly this year, but there's still enough moves that can be made, whether it's in free agency, but honestly, even trades where the Lakers can move up to tier 2, they can move down within tier 3. Other teams could, move over them in tier 3. So it's still, I mean, again, kind of like our grades, giving them a B, B+, it's still fluid. But as of right now, July 3rd, the morning of July 3rd, no moves. Honestly, it does not feel like anything's happened since it's almost a 24 hour.
It was like everything happened the first 24 hours of free agency, and then it's been there was the DeAndre Ayton sweepstakes that everyone was waiting for. I thought there'd be some dominoes after that, but it's been a quiet morning so far. But of course, we just jinxed it, and by the time this podcast comes out, there'll be like 3 trades and 7 signings with the top guys remaining.
Well, there's that reported 17 trade.
That's the other thing.
So maybe that's also...
Which my understanding, for the record, is just that the Lakers would be added in with the Thero trade, or Thero, excuse me. That the I throws me off. It's Thero. The Thero trade, they would be added in as part of, with they traded with Brooklyn from 45 to 36 with cash to get that pick. So I think there's only 5 current NBA players in that trade, with it just expanding out from the KD trade.
So yeah, maybe once like the details of that get finalized, like teams are for sure like, this is how it's going to look. This is the impact on our books on it. Maybe we see a little bit more. Okay, now we can move a little bit more certainty on. All right, we can sign this guy. We can make this trade. Like, because that's insane. Like, imagine a 7-way phone call. I can't even do like a 2-way, 3-way phone call. A 7-way phone call. Just like, wait, who is this? And then like you say, if you have, I mean, it's 5 players, but imagine if someone tried to sneak in like, say that second round pick in 2032 instead of 2029. You're like, wait, what?
If I'm the Lakers, I'm trying to. Can I throw in a second and shakes? I don't know the exact rules of non-guaranteed. I believe you have to guarantee someone to trade them. I think that's the rule. I know that used to be the rule. I don't know, like the CBA's. It's you got to have like a CBA degree to fully understand all of the little details with it. But if I could throw in Shake in a second and get Nick Richards, I would do that if I'm the I would be trying to find a way to add that in to this deal. But we'll see.
Yeah, the problem is that you don't know, like when you have a 7-team trade, you don't know if that's even like, is that even possible?
Yeah, I don't know. There was the previous rules, like you got to be touching every team in the deal that I'm like, yeah, all right, now we're sending this and this, and it gets complicated. There's a reason why we haven't seen a 7-team trade before.
Isn't the record, was it 5 or 6 with the Clay trade to Dallas?
I think it might have, let's see. Might have been, I know it was at least 5, but I don't remember if it was 6.
Yeah,
16 trade. It was 6. It was 6. First 16 trade. So there you go. We're going to at some point have a 15-team trade. It's half the league.
Well, that's what happens. That's what happens when the CBA is so complicated. Now the transactions get more complicated. Now, because
we'll monitor it. We'll have to check in later in the offseason. But Khobi, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. We said we were going to go 40 minutes, and of course we went almost 30 minutes past that, because that's what we do here on Buha's Block. But outside of subscribing to the Southern California News Group to read your work, checking you out on the Lakers Insider Show on BR, that's Tuesdays, I believe.
Yeah, every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time. I know you got a late night gang, but if you guys want to come in the afternoon, maybe early evening, depending on where you live.
Afternoon gang,
yeah. It's always a fun time.
We're flexible here.
Gang.
Midday gang.
Midday
gang. There you
go. I'm a midday.
You got to start your branding. But yeah, check out Khobi there. Check out his X account. Instagram, I don't know if you want to check out Khobi's Instagram. He maybe not the Instagram story sometimes, but or maybe you do. Whatever's your cup of tea. But Khobi, I appreciate you. Thank you again. And thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'm traveling the rest of the day. This is, again, now almost Thursday around noon. So we'll be unlikely to go live, but we'll see if something crazy happens. I might have to come on here and go live. But otherwise, I will talk to you soon.